In a world built by men, these women ruled through the bedroom. Welcome to Empire of Desires. We strip away the lies to reveal the seductive and scandalous truth of the harlots, sirens, and mistresses who used their bodies to buy power. They were lethal, they were legendary, and they were unrepentant. In the heart of Istanbul, where the call to prayer echoes over the shimmering Bosphorus, lies a history buried in silk and scandal. Most empires are built on land or blood, but today we explore an empire built on the most primal human currency, desire. We are diving into the life of a woman who shouldn't have existed. She was a devout Christian in a Muslim land, a high society seamstress who became the queen of brothels, and a woman who paid the taxes of an entire nation with the earnings of the bedroom. Her name was Matild Manukyan. She was the ultimate lady boss, a woman who realized that in a world ruled by men, the fastest way to the top was to own the keys to their darkest fantasies. Born in 1914 to an aristocratic Armenian family, Matild was not a child of the gutters. She was highly educated, attending elite French schools, and possessed the refined grace of a lady. She started her career as a high-end tailor, sewing exquisite gowns for Istanbul's elite. But her destiny changed not with a stitch, but with a debt. Legend has it that one of her clients, a woman who owned a property in the Karakoy district, couldn't pay for her dresses. Instead of cash, she offered Matild a share in her business, a legal brothel. Most women of her status would have burned the contract in shame, but Matild looked at the paperwork and saw something else: untapped power. She realized that while fashion fades, lust is eternal. She didn't just take the share, she took control. She traded her needles for a ledger of sin, and the empire of Manukyan began its slow, seductive rise. She began to acquire more and more licenses, strategically picking locations that were hidden yet accessible to the city's powerful elite. She understood the psychology of her clients better than they understood themselves. She knew that a man with a secret is a man who can be managed, and she became the keeper of the city's most dangerous secrets. By the 1970s, Matild Manukyan was no longer just a property owner, she was a mogul. She owned 37 legal brothels, and her name became synonymous with the red light districts of Turkey. In a country where this trade was strictly regulated by the state, she operated it with the cold, calculated precision of a Fortune 500 CEO. She didn't see herself as a criminal, she saw herself as a visionary of a necessary evil. She provided her girls with health insurance, social security, and regular medical checkups, a move that was unheard of in the underworld. By humanizing the vice and providing a layer of safety, she attracted the most beautiful and sought-after women in the region, ensuring that her establishments were always the gold standard of the trade. But brothels were just the beginning of her sprawling influence. She began laundering her sinful profits into holy assets, creating a portfolio so vast it became difficult for the government to track. She bought 500 luxury apartments in the most prestigious neighborhoods of Istanbul, 50 prime commercial shops, several world-class hotels in coastal paradises like Antalya and Kuşadası, and even a factory. Her lifestyle became a legend of its own. She moved through the city in a fleet of bulletproof Mercedes-Benz cars, a tiny woman in modest clothes who held the wealth of a small country in her bank accounts. She was no longer just a madam, she was the landlord of Istanbul, owning the very soil upon which the men who judged her walked. Then came the great irony that shocked the world and silenced her critics. For 5 consecutive years, the Turkish government awarded the gold plaque for the highest taxpayer in the country to one person, Matild Manukyan. Think about the staggering hypocrisy of the era. While politicians, judges, and religious leaders condemned the decay of morality from their public pulpits, they were quietly balancing the national budget with her money. She was single-handedly funding hospitals, schools, and national infrastructure with the proceeds of the bedroom. She famously once said, "I turn the wheels of this country's economy with the desires of its men." She was the silent partner of the state, a woman who proved that in the end, gold has no scent, and money doesn't care where it comes from as long as there is enough of it to buy silence and political protection. But sitting on a throne of sin for decades makes you a target for more than just the taxman. Radical groups called her the Armenian devil, and rival criminal mobs lusted for her blood and her territory. In 1995, the empire almost came crashing down in a cloud of smoke and fire. As she stepped into her luxury Mercedes in a busy Istanbul street, a massive, remote-controlled bomb detonated. The blast was so powerful, it turned the heavy car into a heap of twisted metal and shattered glass. Her bodyguard and driver were killed instantly. Matild, however, was a survivor, forged in the fires of the streets. Despite being 80 years old, she endured 12 major grueling surgeries. She emerged from the hospital months later, not weakened, but legendary. The bomb proved that she was more than a madam. She was a political force that couldn't be erased by violence. She returned to her office, surrounded by even more guards, her eyes colder than ever before. She knew the cost of her power, and she was willing to pay it in blood and pain. The final and most haunting paradox of Matild Manukyan was her soul. Every morning, the woman who owned the city's vice would go to her local church, light a candle, and bow her head in prayer. She was a massive, anonymous donor to Christian charities, schools, and orphanages. She lived in a house filled with religious icons and ancient Bibles, while her safes just a few feet away were filled with the deeds to houses of pleasure. She saw no conflict between her faith and her business, often claiming she was providing a service that kept society stable. When she died in 2001 at the age of 87, she left behind a fortune estimated in the billions. Many assume that a woman ruling the largest vice empire in Turkish history must have had a tumultuous love life, but the truth of Matild Manukyan's private life was surprisingly conservative. In her youth, she married a quiet man from Istanbul's Armenian community named Aram Çakır. Unlike Matild, who possessed a fierce spirit and a ruthless business mind, Aram remained a marginal figure. During the years when Matild was shrewdly transforming her father's inheritance in the notorious Karaköy district into a modern empire of brothels, Aram was merely a silent companion. His early death placed Matild in a position to seize total control. She never remarried, stating in rare interviews with cold pride that no man could ever compete with her intelligence or financial power. Thus, she chose to remain the undisputed queen of her dark trade. The only fruit of this traditional marriage was a son named Queen Çakır, who spent his entire life in the heavy, infamous shadow of his mother's reputation. Matild, acutely aware of the public's disdain for her profession, was obsessed with keeping her son away from the mire of her business. She cocooned him in legendary wealth and luxury, sending him to the most prestigious schools abroad to ensure his hands remained unstained by the direct management of the Red Houses. However, fate was inescapable, and Queen eventually inherited the entirety of that dirty fortune. Upon Matild's death in 2001, the staggering scale of her wealth was revealed. Thousands of properties, hundreds of taxis, massive factories, and the Karaköy Empire. But this cursed legacy entered a new phase of scandal following Queen's death in 2020. Suddenly, claimants emerged from the shadows, filing lawsuits and claiming to be Matild's hidden children from secret affairs with powerful men. This legal battle over the $4 billion Manukyan estate continues to this day, proving that even in death, her life remains inextricably linked to the beds of power and fortune. She was a woman who used the weaknesses of men to build an indestructible fortress for herself. She proved that in the empire of desires, beauty might be a weapon, but a cold, calculating brain is the only ammunition that guarantees survival. What is your opinion on this story? Was she a seductive genius who exploited a flawed system, or just a scandalous sinner who traded in human misery? Write your thoughts for us in the comments. We want to know how you judge the woman who owned the secrets of a nation.